Thank you, team, and good morning to all of you in the room today. Balcony, main floor here, online audience. We want to just give a very special shout out to those watching online. Maybe you're on vacation. Todd and Christine just came back from Germany last week and said, we were watching you from Germany. Isn't that kind of neat how we have that audience everywhere? So wherever you are on vacation, online audience, we want to give you a welcome. Church, would you join us in welcoming our online audience this morning? It's good to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just give you a little bit of history in introducing our speaker this morning. In 2007, this church was built here in this location. And in 2009, Doug and Cressa Coldsmith joined Grand Point Church. They came from some other ministries and came in here. Some of you came at that same time, and it was just a beautiful way to come in. We had a united worship service in the gym at that time, as well as a service in here. And so in 2012, when I was invited to come to Grand Point, I was checking out this church out here in Franklin County. Didn't know anything about Franklin County or Chambersburg, so I thought I'm going to check out this church. And I watched online, and I saw Doug preaching. And I'm like, man, this guy is really, really good. And so I thought, well, that was part of the influence for me wanting to come here. Ultimately, it was God who called me, Doug, not you, but God called me here, but there was just something about that. Then we came here, and I met his wife, Cressa, and she was even better than Doug. I'm just kidding. In other ways. So we just got to know Cressa, and Cressa had such a heart for ministry, was so effective, and has just become, Doug and Cressa have become great friends to so many people here in this room. About 6 years ago, we began having some conversations with Cressa about her call to ministry and what God was doing in her life. And she's still trying to discern that, like some of you are as well. Like, where's God taking me? How's God planning to use me? But a little over a year ago, Cressa enrolled in graduate studies at Weinbrenner Theological Seminary. And this past semester, she had a homiletics class, which is preaching. And she was given the assignment to preach from Mark chapter 5, the exact text that is part of our series on questions that Jesus asked. And when I found out that Cressa did that, and saw the script and saw her message, I thought, Cressa, you need to do that here. You're going to be blessed today by Cressa's message. So would you join me in giving Cressa Coldsmith a welcome to the stage this morning? Thank
you. Thank you, Pastor Lawrence. Yes, it's been 14 years since we've been a part of Grand Point, and we're so thankful for this church family, for Pastor Lawrence and Penny and their leadership. And as Lawrence mentioned, I'm in school, and my husband, I'm not going to mention any names, but my husband, in January, decided to enroll. And we had the same class together. So we had decided, this was a pre-recorded class. It was just an audio, so no video, 3 hours long of just a lecture, like fire hydrant. It was terrible. So we decided Wednesday nights would be our night to take this class from 6 to 9 p.m. That was our date. And he would leave work, pick up dinner, come home, and we'd begin. So a Wednesday night came along, and he had a meeting that came up that he had to be at, and it was at 4 o'clock. I thought, okay, no problem. He'll be home by 6. Yeah, you're good. Well, 5 o'clock came, no husband. 5:30, no husband. 6 o'clock, no husband. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I haven't gotten a call or a text or anything. What am I supposed to do? Do I start class? Do I wait till he gets home? And I was getting frustrated because I'm thinking, I don't want to be up till midnight taking this class. Like, I'm going to fall asleep before he gets home. And so I just, in that moment, felt myself becoming more and more frustrated, irritated, bitter, angry, and even a little bit jealous of the people who were taking the time from my husband and I. Have you ever been there? Just me? Or have you ever had an interruption that just totally messed up your plans? There's often interruptions to our plans that can easily be quite irritating. Our plans can be interrupted or even completely go out the window due to a need that arises around us. And we can easily become bitter or resentful because our plans are taken off course. We can even become annoyed with people and their needs or requests. Today, we're going to take a look at a significant interruption in a moment of desperation. The question for today is, who touched my clothes in our series? And that's what we're going to be looking at. But before we go there, I want to just take a look at where you might find yourself at today. Maybe you've been asking God for something or for him to move in some way, and there's nothing but crickets. Maybe you feel weary from caring for the people around you, and quite frankly, you just need people to leave you alone. Maybe it's that you've been questioning if God will heal a painful area in your life, and in that, you've been questioning his goodness. Could these places that we find ourselves in be a matter of doubting God's perfect plan? Could it mean that we don't really trust him? Do we lack in our faith? My question for you this morning is, where do you lack in faith and trust in God's perfect plan for your life? I believe that our faith leads to trust in God's perfect plan no matter the situation. Would you pray with me? Father God, I pray that you would open up our hearts and our minds to hear from your word today, that you would help us to see and understand what it means to have faith and trust in your plans. Amen. So we're going to be diving into a familiar story in the Bible, picking right up where Lawrence left off last week in Mark chapter 5, verse 21. So Jesus had just cast out this legion of demons from a man on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And in verse 21, it says, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she had gotten worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around and he asked, who touched my clothes? There's the question. You see all of these people crowding around you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it, and the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. We may all be familiar with this hemorrhaging woman and her trust and her faith that through just a quick touch of Jesus's clothes, she could be healed. And she was right. She reached out and her suffering was put to an end. It was a miracle. And just imagine if her doubts, though, had gotten in the way. What she would have missed out on. And how often do we, church, let our doubts get in the way? Our doubts can sometimes keep us from God's restoration or his protection or his direction because we just try to take it and control it and do what we want because we don't trust him. We question his voice. We question his word and his promises. This woman stepped out in faith that day. She knew what was at stake. But she also knew her desperation and that Jesus was her only hope. Pastor Lawrence touched on this last week also, the Jewish law, which determined what was clean and unclean. And due to her bleeding, this woman was considered to be unclean, dirty, cast out. Society didn't want to have anything to do with her. She was labeled. And this is the reason why she just wanted to touch Jesus's robe, the very, very bottom edge of it. This way she wouldn't cause him to become unclean according to the law. We're going to come back to that in a bit, but I want to move on to Jairus now. Picture this with me. Jairus, he's a religious leader. He's working in the local synagogue. This means that his role was to run the Jewish school, take care of the building and the grounds, and also direct the worship. This means that he was the youth pastor, the facilities manager, and the worship leader. That's a lot. And then on top of all of that, he was also a father and a husband and a son. I mean, we can only imagine how tired he was. A lot of us might find ourselves feeling that way today. We just have so many things that we're managing and juggling. And that was Jairus. He's tired. He's weary, carrying a lot on him. And then he finds out that his daughter is dying. On top of everything else, now God throws this at him. And the big question that I wonder if he might have asked at that time was, God, why would you do this to me when I have been so faithful to you? Why me? Why now? Why this? Have you ever been there? You ever asked God those questions? But then Jairus remembers hearing about this rabbi named Jesus, and he seeks him out, wondering maybe he could be the answer for his daughter. And he goes in hopeful faith, and he finds Jesus, and Jesus agrees to go with him to see his daughter. But along the way, there's an interruption. Enter the woman. The crowd is out of control. They're pressing in, everyone wanting to see Jesus, hear him, see a miracle. And then he stops dead in his tracks and is asking who touched him. Power left him and he felt it. And he will not move on until he finds out who it was. And then this unclean woman admits it was her. And she believed that her suffering would end in that moment. And she too was hopeless and desperate, just like Jairus. So what was Jairus thinking in that moment? They're in a hurry to go to where his daughter is, and he cannot waste 1 minute. Jesus, we gotta go. We gotta keep moving. We don't have time to stop for you to find out who touched you in this crowd. Do you think he might have been a little bit irritated? Maybe a little annoyed? Does this strengthen his faith in that moment, or does it make him jealous? He sees Jesus take time to care for this woman. Will he do the same for him? Will he get his miracle too? Or is it going to be too late? So picking up on verse 35, we read, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, and they said, your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore? And overhearing what they said, Jesus looked at Jairus and he told him, do not be afraid, just believe. Who needs to hear that today? Do not be afraid, just believe. Church, no matter what desperate situation you find yourself in today, God wants to say to you that he sees you and he's with you and he's not going to leave you. That he's got this, he's got you, he's got your situation. Stop freaking out. Stop panicking, stop worrying, stop doubting. He's over it. He's in control and he has a plan for you that you can't see, but he can. In verse 37, he did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John. When they came to the home of Jairus, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing, and he went in and said, what is all this about? This child is not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him, so Jesus threw them out of the house, and he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and they went in to where the child was. And he took her by the hand, and he said to her, Talitha koum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. Church, because God is sovereign over all and he has a plan, we must learn to trust his perfect timing, the interruptions, and his healing touch. Our faith leads to trust in God's perfect plan, no matter the situation. So I want to highlight 3 areas from these stories and break them down for us. So we have timing, interruptions, and touch. Number 1, his perfect timing. His plan may be your miracle already in the making. I never caught this until I started preparing this message, but this is 2 miracles that are wrapped up into one story. 2 interconnected encounters with Jesus. And I don't know if you caught this or not, but how old was the little girl? 12. And how long had the woman been suffering? 12 years. Is that a coincidence? I'm thinking not. I think this is 2 very different lives, 2 very different problems, 2 different miracles that were 12 years in the making, woven uniquely together by God for this exact moment in history. They both meet Jesus on the same day in the same town, and they both receive a miracle from him. The healing of the woman was almost an anticipation of the healing, or really the resurrection of the little girl. This is where I believe we've got to trust the process. We got to trust the timing and trust his plan. It's in the waiting. It's in the waiting when we truly experience the fullness of his goodness and his faithfulness. So let's talk about interruptions to our plans. Number 2, his perfect interruption. His perfect plan makes every encounter a divine appointment. Going back to that Wednesday night when I was stuck waiting on my husband and my blood was boiling, I had to come to terms with a few things. First of all, I'm still working on how to respond in these kinds of moments. I don't have it right, and I won't probably for a long time. I'm sure I'll keep getting it wrong. But also, we've been married for 24 years. Guys, that's 12 2-year waiting periods. And we still haven't figured it out. He still doesn't get home on time. Can I get an amen? Anybody? Come on. So when you face an interruption, I want to encourage you to shift your thinking to seeing those people, those situations, those things that come up and throw you off. See them as divine appointments and believe that God has you there, right there, in that moment for a specific purpose. Be confident in that. Own it. Step into it. Trust the process. Number 3, his perfect touch. His perfect plan includes his healing touch for you. When he reaches out for you or you reach out to him, there is healing in the touch of his hand. We sang about that in that last song. His love still reaching. If you notice, both of these miracles began with a touch. The woman who reached out to Jesus, if only I touch his clothes, I'll be healed. And then Jesus who reached out and touched the little girl, taking her by the hand. Guys, this was a dead girl. What did that mean in Jewish law? Unclean. Don't touch. But Jesus touches her. He gets dirty in order to rescue you. He is not afraid of your filth, your mess. He's not afraid of it, guys. He doesn't run from it. In fact, he's drawn to it because he wants to save you. He wants to rescue you, and he wants to free you. He's drawn to you in your time of need. David wrote in Psalm 4:18, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." Who needs rescued today? Peter wrote in 1 Peter 4:19, "So if you're suffering in a manner that pleases God, keep on doing what is right and trust your lives to the God who created you, for he will never fail you." Say that with me. He will never fail you. Sometimes our circumstances distort our view of God and his goodness. And this can look like a lot of things. Maybe it's someone who found out that they have a terminal illness, or you've lost someone that you love. Maybe it's losing a job and having no idea how you're gonna pay the bills, how you're gonna put food on the table. Maybe it's a spouse who walked out on you or cheated on you, or your marriage is just completely falling apart, or maybe it's just really distant. A child who's far from God and living only for themselves and their own pleasures. Maybe it's a friend who said something or did something that was really hurtful. Maybe it's feeling rejected or unappreciated. Or maybe it's just a world that appears to be getting more and more hopeless day by day. I don't know what situation you might feel that doubt and that question of God's goodness and who he is and what is he doing. These things can easily distort our perspective of who God is and cause us to question everything. But I want you to hear this morning. God's nature isn't defined by our experiences or our opinions. He isn't defined by the hardships that we go through. His goodness isn't dependent upon our joys or our suffering. Our hurt and our pain is not a sign that he is upset with us. If you've believed that, oh, okay, so I have this area in my life that's just really terrible and difficult, it's because of what I did, 10 years ago. It's my punishment. No, God doesn't work that way. His character is good. It's merciful. It's grace. It's loving. It's kind. It's compassionate. His character, who he is, his nature doesn't change just because of what we experience. If you've been believing those things, it's time to set that aside, because his desire is to meet you right where you are, in the shame, in the guilt, in the depression, in the waiting, in the illness. Church, he hasn't left you. He is drawn to you. Chris T. Green writes this: brokenheartedness and desperation are magnets. They're magnets for his attention. The key is lifting heartbreak and desperation up to him as an offering, a gift of opportunity for him to use. His love and compassion cannot refuse a heart that needs him and knows it. Did you hear that? The key, that's the how. That's how do we do this? How do we trust God? Well, we lift it back up. We give it back to him as an offering, as a gift, to say, God, I don't know why you're putting me through this, but I'm trusting that you have a plan, that you have a purpose, and that somehow you're gonna use it in my life to shape me, but you're also gonna use it in other people because they're gonna watch me go through this and trust you in that process. That's how we do it. Because let's get real, we cannot carry or do any of that on our own. Only with Jesus. Only with Jesus can we get through this life. And when we lift everything up to him, we give it back to him and we trust him to use whatever we're going through as an opportunity for him to work in ways that we can't see. We're not meant to carry it alone. Church, he's with you, he's for you, and he will not fail you. Our faith leads to trust in God's perfect plan, no matter the situation. We must learn to trust his timing, the interruptions in life, and his healing touch. I want you to take just a minute as the band plays to reflect on these three areas. Which one do you need the most right now in your life? For me, it's timing, because obviously I still need to work on my patience. But I often try to just take control or take over, wondering what God has for me next. I don't know. But I've got to trust in his timing and in his process. So that's mine. What's yours? If you have paper, write it down, or you can just close your eyes and reflect on that for a moment. As we sing this next song, Give Me Faith, let's make that our prayer this morning. I want to invite you to just feel free to come up front. I think that sometimes when we express with our bodies what our hearts and our mind want, kneeling, bowing, surrendering, if you have a situation that you've been carrying around that you just need to lay at the feet of Jesus, I want to invite you to do that. If you have something that you just want to say, God, I'm giving this back to you as an offering, as a gift, for you to use what you want, for you to do what you want to do. Whatever that is for you, I invite you to come forward and do that. And if you're here this morning and you're like, I don't really know this Jesus that you're talking about, but I kind of want to learn more, I want to get to know him, I invite you also to come up front and we'll have people pray with you, but also just come talk to Lawrence or Doug or myself or anyone, and just let them know where you're at with that. We want to walk with you through that. You can't do this life alone. He doesn't want you to. He's there with you and he's reaching out for you. Will you accept his touch? Would you pray with me? Father, help us all to trust you more. Deepen our faith. Remove our worries and our fears. God, we want to trust you in all things. Help us to reach out to you just as you reach out to us. God, your ways are so perfect. You are a sovereign God, and we thank you that we can rest in who you are. We lift up our circumstances to you this morning, and we trust, God, that you will use them for your good and your glory. We can't get through this life without you. We need you, Father. Give us faith.